ApisProtect brings groundbreaking technology to commercial beekeeping. Bees, those wonderful little creatures buzzing around gardens and fields, are responsible for a huge proportion of the population that drives global food production. Now, using Internet of Things technologies, ApisProtect extracts data from hives remotely. Their approach applies artificial intelligence to that data and converts it into useful information that helps beekeepers to make the best use of their resources, including the people who look after the beehives. The company was listed in Fast Company's list of the most innovative companies in Europe and won the Startup Award at the Think Global Awards 2020. And ApisProtect won 2 gold awards at the National Startup Awards in 2019, a gold in the Tech Startup of the Year category, and also a gold in the Agri-Tech Startup of the Year category. Now, here to talk to us about ApisProtect and all the wonderful work it does, and lots more, is Dr. Fiona Edwards-Murphy.
Thanks so much. That was a great introduction. It's really great to be back this year at the Think Global Awards. So yeah, it was fantastic. Last year we won the Startup Award. So just want to say congratulations to Fresh Land. It's really exciting to see another food tech, ag tech startup winning that award, and really nice to be nominated again tonight. So thanks very much. So I have some slides here that I'm going to share. Hopefully that will work. I'm going to assume it's working unless somebody interrupts me. So like Declan mentioned, what we do at ApisProtect is we help to safeguard 1/3 of the food that we eat every day. So 1/3 of the foods that we eat every day is dependent upon pollinators. So the majority of those are insect pollinators. And of those, the only insect pollinator that we can actually manage at an industrial scale and at the scale that we do modern agriculture is the honeybee. So honeybees are very important when it comes to a variety of the most nutritious, sorry, 1 second, I just see a chat. Oh, thanks very much. Okay. So they're fundamentally important when it comes to a variety of the foods that bring a huge amount of protein, nutrients, vitamins into our diet. So foods like almonds, avocados, blueberries, cranberries, basically soft fruit, nuts, fruit and vegetables. So honeybees actually trigger the mechanism that allows those plants to turn their flowers into the food that we eat. So they're a keystone species in our diet. And unfortunately, over the last 30 to 40 years, there have been huge problems globally in almost all pollinators, and that does include honeybees. So these days, unfortunately, beekeepers around the world are losing up to half of their honeybees every year. That's due to a variety of different problems, things like diseases, pests, general hive problems, and even actually just being able to manage their honeybees. So as you try to scale up honeybees, scale up beekeeping to supply things like the almond industry, it becomes very difficult to use what are traditional beekeeping methods. So beekeeping is a form of agriculture that really hasn't changed significantly in hundreds of years. I mean, often when we're talking to beekeepers, they tell us, the biggest technological advancement in beekeeping ever, up until our technology, has been the invention of the forklift, because then they're able to pick up 3 or 4 hives at once instead of just 1 hive at a time. So that's, when you're talking about big changes in beekeeping, it's, we're talking about really kind of old technology at this stage. And the one crop that we like to talk about all the time when it comes to honeybees and when it comes to honeybee pollination in particular is the almond industry. So over the last 4 years, I've learned an awful lot about almonds and a lot about the almond industry. And it's an absolutely fascinating event that takes place every year, which is the almond pollination season. So every February, in order for all of the orchards in California, so 80% of the almonds that we eat in the world are produced in California in kind of a 5-county area. So there are 1.33 million acres of almonds there in California. Every single one of those acres, in order for it to produce any almonds at all, needs 2 beehives. So we need to put 2 beehives in every single acre of almond orchards. There are 1.33 million acres in California. So logically, we're saying we need 2.6 million beehives in order for the almond industry to exist at all. And unfortunately, there are only 2 million beehives in the entire commercial beekeeping industry in the US. So you can see there that we're instantly running into a problem. So over the last, say, 30 years, the prices that farmers will pay beekeepers just to put their beehives in their almond orchards have risen exponentially. Now beekeepers get paid about $2 every February for about 2 weeks. So that's very, very lucrative for the beekeepers, which is great. It's made beekeeping a much more profitable area of agriculture to be working in. But it's also led to a lot of problems, like that, trying to scale up beekeeping, trying to keep more beehives with the same amount of resources is very difficult. And also just trying to manage transporting the beehives in and out. So you could be spending $20,000 on loading up a truck with 400 beehives and driving it from somewhere like, the East Coast, somewhere like Louisiana or somewhere like Maine, drive those beehives all the way across to California, and then drive them back at the end of the almond orchard season. But actually that's still profitable for the beekeepers, but it's very difficult. It's a good way to damage your beehives, for your beehives to die. If they're sick or unhealthy at the start of that journey, they can often be dead by the time they finish that journey. And unfortunately, it's so intense, it's so fast, you need to be able to deliver your hives to almonds on time, or you don't get paid for your contract and you've wasted the $20,000 to ship your bees across the country. So the beekeepers are trying to work as fast as possible. They're trying to get everything done with very limited resources. And that leads to a huge amount of problems. It's not great for the bee health. It's not great for the farmers themselves. They're very stressed, and they have no visibility of what's going on in their operation at all because they're running around. The only way to understand what's happening inside in the beehive is to drive to the beehive, which could be, there could be a 2 or 3 hour drive away from your farm, because you can only keep beehives so close together before they start to outcompete each other for food. So you have to drive out to your bee farm. You have to put on your bee suit. You have to open up the beehive and look inside and rummage around for a while before you even know what's going on. Another thing bee farmers tell us regularly is, I wish I could be a dairy farmer, because at least I can drive down the road outside the field and I can tell if all the cows are dead. If you're a beekeeper, you can't tell if all of your hives are dead until you've done a lot of work. So that's what we saw back in 2017, myself and my co-founder, or my co-founders. We saw that there was this industry that had these huge specific problems, and that, I spent a few years working on technology. So my own background is in electrical engineering. So I studied electrical engineering at UCC, University College Cork, here in Cork, and fell in love with sensor technologies and sensor applications. So I really, really loved what was called at that stage wireless sensor networks. Today it's called the Internet of Things. It's had a variety of different names in between. But basically, I loved taking sensors into the real world, collecting data, and then using that to achieve something meaningful. I mean, that's what made me absolutely fall in love with the area of Internet of Things. Just using data to help change things in the real world. So working on things like e-health, structural health monitoring, even education, and the impact that IoT can have on those industries. And when I started to learn about beekeeping and learn about the bee industry, I was like, oh, it's so obvious. You need sensors. Like, sensors is how you're going to tell what's going on out there before you have to drive all the way out to the fields and do your work. So I spent a few years at UCC doing my PhD on sensor applications for bee health. And in 2017, just finishing that up, I was like, so there's technologies available in the market, but they're quite clunky. They're very expensive. The battery doesn't last very long in them. So they're really not suitable for these kind of operations, the operations where you've got to move 10 or 20,000 beehives across the country. You can't be fiddling around with wires and fiddling around with batteries inside every one of those beehives. It completely cancels out the whole objective of sensor technology. So what we wanted to do was create something that could be scaled up in the same way that beekeeping needs to scale up in order for us to keep eating all of these really important foods. So what we've done, we've developed our solution. So we've got an in-hive sensor. So it's a small sensor that goes inside the beehive. From that sensor, we collect temperature, humidity, sound, and movement data. So those are the 4 data points that we found were most useful. We extract that data from beehives all around the world, and then we apply our machine learning techniques. So machine learning, a lot of you have probably heard about it already. It's a core part of artificial intelligence. It's basically a computer that can learn from past experiences. So we've collected an awful lot of data from the real world about what the sensors are saying inside healthy beehives, inside unhealthy beehives, inside beehives that are dead, beehives that are producing honey or not producing honey. And what that computer is able to do is identify from new sensor data that comes in, okay, that beehive looks like a beehive that was healthy in the past or a beehive that was unhealthy in the past. And it's able to then pass back to the beekeeper actionable insights. What these actionable insights are is information about what's happening in the beekeeper's operation. So we didn't want to tell beekeepers, okay, you have to understand what the temperature inside your beehive means. Like, you don't need to learn about the patterns as, you know, bees produce more babies or they produce less honey and the temperature changes. We don't want the beekeepers to have to become experts in that. We want to tell them, okay, we're looking at your temperature and it's telling us that you need to go inspect your beehive, or you need to go feed your beehive, or your beehive's after falling over because it's windy in your field. You know, simple things like that even are very, very important when your beehive is a 3-hour drive away. So that's our product that we set out to do, and that's what we've done. And as part of that, we had to collect data from beehives all over the world. So we had a very interesting few years in 2017, 2018, and 2019. We launched, or we didn't launch our product, we launched our R&D phase, where we partnered with beekeepers all over the world. So beekeepers in the USA, here in Ireland, in the UK, and in South Africa, to get that data set in order to train our machine learning. So I've got some nice photos here. It was a really interesting adventure just to see what beekeeping was like all over the world when you're coming from Ireland, where we've got, you know, you learn an awful lot about beekeeping and you learn about why you're doing things. Like here in Ireland, we've got very big hives, very heavy hives because it's really windy. And what we want to do is make sure that in the middle of the winter, the beehive isn't going to fall over and open and, you know, get too cold and die. Whereas, for example, here in our beehives in South Africa, they were really, really small and really, really light because they're trying to cool them down as much as possible because it gets a lot hotter. So that's actually a beehive in a wildlife reserve in South Africa. Another problem that they were dealing with there was baboons. So when you're dealing with technology, until you go into the real world, you don't really learn about all of the problems that you're going to have to deal with. So there, it was like, okay, if there's any wires, anything exposed, the baboons are going to come along and they're going to rip it all out because they like to just play with anything that's different. So that was an interesting challenge to solve. Here we've got hives in California, which again, they're concerned a lot more about heat than they were about cold or wind, or they're worried as well about forest fires and knowing where your beehives are and making sure that they get moved before they burn. So that was really interesting. And then even hotter again, we have beehives in Arizona. And you know, there they have a lot of trouble with Africanized beehives. So beehives that have had this interaction with between African and European bees that create very dangerous bees. So you have to wear a lot more safety equipment going out to those beehives than you do, say, in Ireland. And then we have another picture a little bit closer to home. So this is in the Peak District in the UK. So at the top of a mountain. So we're dealing with, I guess, beekeeping a bit more similar to here in Ireland. You're worried about cold, you're worried about damp, you're worried about wind. But it was, you know, again, a really interesting place to see that there's a lot more, I guess, commercially scaled beekeeping in the UK than there is in Ireland because their climate is just that little bit more reliable than ours. So it was really interesting to spend all of that time in the field. And I think something that we've done at ApisProtect that I'm particularly proud of is everybody on our team. So we've got a great team of engineers, software developers, business development people, marketing people, and we all spend time in the field. Everybody has worn a bee suit. Everybody has been out there and understands how the products that we're producing fits into the real world of beekeeping. So we've spent a lot of time in the field. Everybody knows, everybody cares very deeply about bees and about the impact that our technology has on the bees, the animal welfare, and then the agriculture and the food production and the sustainability of what we're doing. I've got a picture here of our final product. So an awful lot of engineering challenges to overcome, things like batteries. What kind of battery are you going to use? How are you going to make sure the battery lasts long enough when it's getting really hot and really cold? How are we going to make sure the bees themselves don't destroy the product, because they like to cover everything inside in the beehive with stuff they have that's called propolis, which is basically like a varnish that they collect from trees, covered in wax, even, you know, dripping honey on it. So it's waterproof, it's propolis resistant. It's now completely self-installed by the beekeeper. So, you know, another thing we think about a lot is how does this technology get deployed? If we seriously want someone with 10,000 beehives to install this in their operation, you know, it needs to be, we've gotten there less than 2 minutes per beehive, so it's a few days to roll the technology out. Then when it's being maintained, the battery life is over 2 years on it. There's no equipment required, because you can very, very quickly with these kind of large operations, you're asking them to do something like replace the batteries every 6 months. Suddenly they have to employ a person just to keep doing laps of their operation replacing batteries. So understanding everything really about the real world that the product is going to have to experience. Another thing is our website. So we designed this as the website where the beekeepers go to actually access the data and learn about what's happening in their beehives. And again, we have to think about this, we have to take a step back, you know, especially as a team of scientists and engineers. We love data, we love numbers, we love insights, and we're, you know, always thinking about all the cool things that we can do and all the interesting and technological things that we can do. We had to take a step back and go, what do the beekeepers actually want to know about? So we tell them really, really straightforward things like this screen in particular. If the beehive is lying on its side, that beehive has had a movement event. So it could be knocked over, it could be damaged, or a bear could have opened it. You know, it's taking it back down to the really simple information that actually has the biggest impact on an operation. And as well, another thing we had to think about was the language barriers. So, you know, we all speak English on the team, but we've got a variety of different languages as well as different second languages, and understanding that everybody who's going to be using the technology in the field doesn't necessarily speak English. So make sure that the information can be conveyed as easily as possible, regardless of somebody's you know, primary language. And here's another screenshot of this is the kind of information that we provide to our beekeepers in Ireland. So we identify here's, you know, the beehives that have strange temperature behavior, strange humidity behavior, the sound is different. So that helps them identify which beehives in their operation are you know, behaving differently and that they need to actually go inspect. Because what we've seen over the last few years is 80% of the beehives at any given time don't need to be inspected. And right now, beekeepers are inspecting every single beehive in their operation. So that means 80% of their labor budget is actually wasted because they're inspecting beehives that don't need to be inspected. They're working on beehives that don't need work. And what the benefit of having that kind of information is it helps them to manage their time and resources, helps them to, you know where their people, where their attention is needed. They're able to check on their beehives anytime, anywhere. They can just log into the website and see what's going on, evaluate the condition of each colony remotely, and then identify which beehives are weak, which ones actually need the intervention, which ones are those 20% of beehives that need people's attention at any given time. And as a result of that kind of information, what we see is improved apiary management. So when you know what beehives actually need your attention, you can give each individual beehive more attention. There's increased production, so more productive hives are grown, more bees in that beehive. That means more honey production, more pollination output, fewer losses. We're able to identify and intervene on problems earlier, and peace of mind. So just knowing that you're able to log in and check if your beehives are dead makes the beekeepers relax an awful lot more. So that's the overview of what we do at ApisProtect. You know, anybody who's interested in learning more, feel free to reach out to us. You can go onto our website. That's the best place to learn a bit more about us. We're, you know, just really excited to be able to provide a technology. And we're providing our products that are released actually is our commercial technology in the US. So we're working with commercial beekeepers over there, and then here in Europe, we've launched our hobbyist technology in Ireland. So we're, you know, it's available for pre-order at the moment for delivery later on in the summer. And so Irish beekeepers can access our technology too. And our objective is to make Irish beekeepers the most technologically advanced beekeepers in the world. And then we'll move on to the rest of Europe and make them just as advanced. So you know, thanks very much for listening. And what we do at ApisProtect is we help protect our most important little friends, keep them healthy, and continue providing us with food for generations to come.
Thank you very much, Fiona. You certainly leave us with a reinforced respect for those important little friends buzzing around us. And while the bees, of course, are central characters in your fascinating story, it's very reassuring to see that beekeepers around the world are helping to sustain our food chain using the ingenuity and the technology that you bring to bear on the problems they face. So thank you very much for that.